Okay, we are back from our prayer time, and Brother Harold is up today, so let's get him a microphone. And he is going to work on question number 30, if I'm not mistaken, which I have been before. Do it from here then? You're going to have to put the... Yeah. Oh, we can raise it to some degree. Yeah. If you can see yourself.
Is your glasses down? From the eyes up. That's better. Okay, so when I was assigned this question, Pastor said that it was a tough one.
Hold them. If you want to take
Yeah.
it out and hold it, might be easier.
So when I was assigned this question, Pastor said that would be a tough one, and it is. So I prepared a little reference or presentation regarding the poor, and I'll lead up to the question. So we often hear references to the poor in the New Testament times. And who were the poor during those times? Was poor a social or economic term, or both? What part of the population would have been considered poor, and how did they become that way? The Greek language has two terms for the word poor. Penes refers to a person who does manual labor, usually for wealthy landowners, for meager salaries. A patachos refers to those who are reduced to begging and is destitute of all resources, especially farm and family. So one has very little and the other has nothing, but they would both be considered poor. At the top of the social chain were the one percenters, the monarchs, the aristocratic families. Then there were the retainer class, the tax collectors, police, scribes, priests, who took up to 5% of bulk of the population. And 75% consisted of merchants, artisans, farmers, fishermen, and very few of who were well off. Finally, about the last 15% were the down and outers, the beggars, the cripples, the prostitutes, the criminals who lived in the hedges on the outside of the cities. The rise of cities and empires took place because peasants were able to produce an agricultural surplus, which they were able to keep it all. They were unable to keep it all because of stronger and more clever folks, either by plunder or by taxes. The typical types of taxes then were head tax, land tax, surrendering food and animals for military use, tolls on all produce, goods brought to market. The whole taxation system might equal to 30 to 40%, which was so high they were left with only their daily sustenance. And state tax took them with nothing in return. There was no unemployment insurance, no Social Security, no disability, no Medicare. The Roman taxation system was so oppressive that it created a flood of debtors who finally lost their lands because they couldn't pay. So one could be considered poor while still working, and there could be poor as being a beggar. So in regards to question 30, James was addressing the church in Philippi, expressing concerns of congregations becoming social circles where the poor were given the understanding they were not wanted. So the question is, what were the poor less likely to do? Let me read the verse first. The question is in regards to James 2, verse 6. James is telling the church of Philippi, but ye have despised the poor. Do not rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seats? And the question is, so what are the poor less likely to do? The answer is oppress the rich. Because they didn't have the means to do so. Wait a minute. They were less likely to oppress the rich because they did not have the means to do so. Because they were the ones being oppressed by greed and corruption. Answer B, settle arguments in private. That's a wrong answer. Because they couldn't settle arguments in private because they were always out in the public. Answer C is also wrong. Invite the rich to their parties. That's the wrong answer too. They were unable to invite the rich to their parties because I guess they couldn't afford to have parties. Unless those parties involved fellowship and prayer, I guess they could have had it then. But the poor of that day and also of today will receive the greatest reward of all. From Luke chapter 4, when Jesus began his ministry in his hometown of Nazareth, he was invited into the synagogue on the Sabbath day as a visiting rabbi to speak. He stood up and read, and there was handed unto him the book of the prophet Esaias. And when he opened the book, he found the place where it was written, The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives and recovering sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. Then he closed the book and he gave it again to the minister and sat down. And all the eyes of them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say to them, This day is scripture fulfilled in your ears. Jesus was proclaiming himself as the Messiah, not so much as the type of Messiah that they were expecting, but as the one who would bring the good news that the kingdom of God is at hand and available to all. So, Pastor, did you hear my answers? Yes. Okay.
Okay, does anybody want to add anything to that? Did that spark any thoughts? Miss Wilma, are you getting ready to say something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. The book is written to the 12 tribes. So he's really admonishing the Hebrews, the Israelites, about despising their own poor. It's not poor from the Gentiles he's referring to. It's their own. And they were taught in the Old Testament, if you owned land and had crops, you were supposed to leave the corners unreaped.
That's right.
And whatever fell for the poor to come and collect because they had nothing.
Right.
So it's really a sad situation that had developed, and I think we can also bring it forward to what we do now. We have no homeless shelters in Bayonne, but there's plenty of homeless people, whether by choice or by force. So these are.
Okay. Anyone else? Brother Tony, you getting ready to say something? Okay. We can give you a moment to get yourself situated.
the the Matthew in Matthew 19 verse 24, Jesus saying, because he has this experience with a rich guy who at almost but not quite, and he said, I say unto you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of God. And then in Matthew 11:5b, it says, and the poor have the gospel preached to them, as Brother Harold pointed out in his quotation from Isaiah. And that's why why the verses, do not rich men oppress you and draw you before judgment seats. There's a parable about a landlord who forgave his servants who cannot pay, but one of them, not learning from the mercy that he received from his landlord, exacted the opposite of what the landlord did, and he just correctly as the verses, rich men oppress you and then bring you before the judgment seats, which that guy did. And the other tenants or servants reported this to the landlord, and the landlord punished the erring servant. So the lesson there is that God really, in the first place, God himself, in his humanity, preferred to be born not as a monarch or in the house of rich people. His parents, of course, legal parent Joseph is a carpenter, and Mary is just a lowly maiden, and they could not afford so much as to bring this in the what do you call this, the tithes to the temple. They just brought turtle doves, and that's it. So the quotation that I just quoted is really an affront to rich people, because they have their wealth, virtually their gods, and forgetting that the riches can begin at any time. That's why Jesus, in one of his parables, said, because he was thinking of building his more, there's so much he has produced, and there's not enough barns to be able to keep them. And God said, "Oh, you fool! If today I will exact from you your soul, or what will happen to your wealth?" So that's my comment on this.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, there might be a few things I wanted to add then. Before I do that, though, anyone at home want to say anything? Okay, well, there's a few reasons, there are a number of reasons why it would be wrong to favor the rich and look down upon the poor, and James touches upon a few of these. First of all, God has chosen the poor people of this world to be rich in faith and heirs of the kingdom to which he promised to those who love him. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, God really must love poor people. There are just so many of them in the world, the common people. And we do see that. And we've also understood that, generally speaking, now this is just generally speaking, this is not always true, but generally speaking, people who have less are more apt to receive God because they know that there's a lack in their lives, whereas rich people are relying on their riches. They don't have any physical needs, so they therefore think, well, if I don't have any physical needs, then everything is just okay. Of course, we know that that is completely wrong. We remember it was the poor who had the gospel preached to them, and it was really the common people who gladly heard Jesus. It wasn't the wealthy or the aristocratic people, which is not to say that there weren't any that did. But when you look at the scriptures and you see who the crowds are mostly made out of, the poor people were there to hear the gospel preached. It was the ruling class, in this case the religious leaders. They weren't there to hear him. They were there to challenge him. Okay, and I don't mean that in a positive way. I mean that in a very negative way. Also, another reason why it's foolish to show deference to the rich is that as a class, they are the ones who have characteristically and regularly oppressed the poor, and we see that in the actual verse, and the people of God as well. When we look around the world today, Christianity is probably the religion that is most mocked and most, put out into the fringe. And who's doing that? The elites, right? What's that? Yes, Soros, right? So we have wealthy people who are not just merely rejecting God, but mocking him at every chance they get. Hollywood takes every advantage of mocking God, and sometimes it's subtle, and these days it's not so subtle. Okay, in the past it was more subtle, but today, I mean, it's just really out there and in your face, and it's just impossible to miss. Okay, so they as a class typically are the ones who oppress the people of God, and the ones who have all the means, and that includes the media then, the mainstream media, and they're all together, and the entertainment industry. Okay, so we're talking about all of that. Okay, a third reason why it's also foolish is just, as I said, it is the rich that are habitually using evil or harsh speech involving the name of Christ. So they are oppressing God's people, and they are mocking the name of Christ and persecuting poor believers. And also, finally, the rich violate the law that God has commanded: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So the rich are not loving their neighbors as themselves. Now, this doesn't mean that there are no rich people that are believers, and it doesn't mean that all rich people are not believers, but typically and historically, this has been the case because, as Brother Tom pointed out, when you're trusting in your own riches, you're not trusting in God. And I believe someone said last week, you cannot serve two masters. You cannot serve God and mammon. Okay, and mammon is representative of riches and money. So when people are trusting themselves and trusting the money that they built up and the empires, but empires come and empires go, whether they be political or family or just based on any kind of commerce. So those are just a few things I wanted to add in there. So when we think about it, when people in churches are embracing rich people, the first thought that usually comes to their mind is, what can they do for me? And sometimes pastors are guilty of this too. It's like, hey, we need a such and such in this church. Oh, maybe Mr. Hotshot businessman can help us with that. He's got the money. But guess what typically happens in those cases? They're happy to put their money into the church, but then they usually seek control because they're the ones donating the bulk of money, and therefore you put yourself at the mercy of people who are donating more, and that should never be. No one's purse or wallet should determine any kind of a vote for any kind of activity or action that the church is going to take, but it happens all too often. Pastor, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, two things. One of the things that you just said just now about people putting money into things, unless if they've got a spiritual quality about them, some spiritual maturity. This reminds me of an issue when somebody goes to give a gift, and many times, they'll give a gift, and maybe people don't, thank them for it, or maybe they take the gift and they use it for something that is either actually foolish or just foolish in the sight of the gift giver. And the gift giver can't say a thing. If you give it as a gift, it's a gift.
That's right.
That's why they call it giving, because it's a gift.
That's right.
And so somebody in church who's going to bless the church, which is great, they've got to do it saying, hey, whatever happens from there. The second thing is that it just struck me that one of the aspects of this passage is that it's definitely speaking to us most directly, because you've got these people who are despising the poor. So he wants them not to despise them. So there's people that are poorer than them, but there's people richer than them also, because now he's saying, just as you resent the rich people and the way they oppress you, don't you do the same thing to people who are poorer than you are.
Right.
One of the things that I think is so hypocritical and so insidious in society is, especially, you hear all the time about all the oligarchs and what they're doing. Well, every party has its oligarchs. Okay, they each have their billionaires that are there.
That's right.
And when you have people that are saying, well, we need to have the government take control and to be able to protect the poor people, sounds good. But the way they protect the poor is by developing all these regulations. And it's like they're saying, vote for me because I know what's best for you, and I'm gonna have all these things in place that's gonna control you. The problem is, it's very deceptive when they say that, because all those regulations that they're putting into place, the oligarchs can deal with that.
Yeah.
They got plenty of lawyers
Right.
to do that. They actually like those regulations that deceptively look like they're for the poor, but they're really aiding the oligarchs because they can afford to do all those things, and all the poor people and the not so poor people, they can't do business in an environment like that.
Right.
So it brings a whole new meaning to us, the middle ones, the ones that are in the middle of this passage, that we want to remember, wait a second, it's not just that the poor get treated bad. We get treated bad too. Not as bad as the poor necessarily,
Right.
but let's remember, we don't like it. Let us not be those stupid people who are trying to control the poor.
Right. Yeah, that was just like in the Exodus, when is it Exodus, like I think it's Exodus, or it might be Leviticus, where God is commanding the Israelites not to treat badly foreigners because they were once foreigners.
Yeah.
They were once in a strange land, and they didn't like the way they were being treated, and he was saying, don't treat them the way you don't like to be treated. And getting back to what you were saying about the rich and the oligarchy and creating the rules, most of the times you don't even have to enforce the rules. It's mostly just a war of attrition. You can continually go to court and even just show up, whereas other people, it's really difficult just to maintain the court costs and the costs of lawyers to be able to even fight for what's actually legal. I mean, but as you said, the oligarchs are the ones that have not only the capability with the lawyers and such, but they have much more stores of resources to be able to maintain and continue those things, when smaller businesses just finally say, we can't put $2 million into this lawsuit, and they just have to settle for whatever might be the best for them in that case. But the same laws that were supposed to be put in place to help the poor usually come back to hurt them even more so.
It reminds me of Reagan and the 9 or 10 worst words you can hear. I'm from the government and I'm here to help.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. Yes. Yes, go ahead, Brother Tone.
Yeah, just to add to what Pastor said, the ones they call oligarchy, as they refer to the current government, is not really that kind of oligarchy. It's them, because they are the ones that support even illegal aliens from being lawyered up and then using the courts to be able to disturb the effort of the government to rid criminals from the country and address the complaints of Americans themselves. So it's a really a communist ideology that runs it. For example, in Russia before the fall of the Soviet Union, the leaders there were not really poor. They had all these dakas. They are the oligarchy, and they control. They are empowered to make the people poor all the time. In China, that's what's happening.
Oh, yeah.
They use slave labor.
Hmm.
So we need to pray really for a government that should be serving the people rather than the way around.
Right. I have yet to see a communist regime where the people in charge don't live so much better than the people they're supposed to be helping, and they adopt the standards of the very people they were trying to get rid of.
Correct. And they even distort the concept of a sanctuary place, like the ones in the Old Testament where a criminal can run to if he believes that he is not guilty.
Right.
These ones, they're really not only just guilty illegally entering the country, but are really criminals being able to exploit and destroy our American society.
Right. Yeah, and that's really the plan. That's not just an accident or a byproduct of what's going on. That's all by design.
Yeah, because it's an educated society and a morally upright society will really be able to govern themselves. With the officials only as their agents, they are supposed to represent their interests.
Right. Well, that's what I believe it was John Adams who said that. He said the Constitution was written for a moral people. It can't be used to govern any other kind of people. So he knew what he was talking about. All right. Anyone else just want to add something? So yeah. So God, I think it all boils down to, again, God says, don't be a respecter of persons, whether it be social class, socioeconomic class, where you're from, and all those kinds of things. God doesn't care. Basically, in God's eyes, there are two kinds of people in the world: saved and unsaved, and that's it. And that's the way we should be looking at it. The person's either saved or he's not saved. And if they come to church and they're saved, good. We can fellowship with them. And if they come to church and they're not saved, then good. We need to reach out to them and witness to them and make sure they have every opportunity to hear the gospel as it's being preached. Okay, I guess we will close with that. Brother Tone, would you close us out with a word of prayer?